1904, New York City. When smoke starts to billow out of a room at the Manhattan Adventurers Society, members of the New York Fire Department show up. As one of the firefighters reaches for the doorknob, the smoke is drawn back into the door frame. As his hand starts to ice, the firefighters smash through the door, revealing a chamber full of frozen bodies and a phonograph playing music in an unidentified language. An enigmatic figure in the shadows is holding an orb that contains an old evil. When the eyes opens, the corpses break apart and the orb opens afterwards. Present day, in order to become full-time Ghostbusters, Callie, Phoebe, Trevor, and Mr. Gruberson, the Spenglers, have relocated from Somerville to Manhattan. They are racing through the streets after a ghost known as the Sewer Dragon. Before it can fly out of range, Trevor almost traps it. However, Callie sets up a drone trap, which captures the ghost, but Gruberson crashes into a rack of city bikes. With the news showing the damage done to the city during their chase, Walter Peck, the former adversary of the Ghostbusters who is currently the mayor of New York City, confronts the family of Ghostbusters. He chastises them for employing Phoebe while she is still a minor, in addition to carrying on with their work and damaging the city. The incident makes headlines and casts the Ghostbusters in a terrible light once more. Furthermore, it is revealed that although Gruberson is attempting to act as a stand-in father figure for Trevor and Phoebe since he started dating Callie, Phoebe is still not quite comfortable with him, despite Callie's best efforts to encourage him. The Ghostbusters return to their headquarters, which Winston is funding. They then added the Sewer Dragon to their containment unit, which is practically a struggle because the containment unit has reached its maximum capacity. In order to create a link to the afterlife for their upcoming web series, Ray and Podcast are currently attempting to do so by using items that belong to previous clients. A woman gives her late husband's watch to Ray, who tries to read it but is unable, and Podcast simply smacks the watch with a hammer. Later, inside their antique shop, Nadim Razmati pays them a visit to try to sell them a bunch of old items belonging to his late grandmother, which includes the orb shown at the beginning of the movie. When Ray tries to measure it with his PKE meter, the orb's energy blasts generate a surge that breaks the meter. Ray pays him for the orb and he left gladly. They are visited by Janine, who notices a crack in the containment chamber caused by the energy blast from the orb earlier. Trevor, meanwhile, heads upstairs to find a mound of junk food after spotting green slime there. Afterwards, he runs into Slimer, who flies through Trevor and coats him in goo before vanishing. When the rest of the Ghostbusters family left without Phoebe because she is a minor, she decides to play chess by herself in the park. One of the pieces begins to move independently. Melody, a ghost girl who perished in a tenant fire, appears. They play for a while and she tells Phoebe about her life before death and that she is having difficulty moving on to the afterlife to be with her family. The following day, they arrived at a ghost research facility sponsored by Winston as well, where parabiologist Lars Pinfield works. Trevor is reunited with Lucky, who also works there. Later that night, Lars observes that the other imprisoned ghosts in there have grown attracted to the orb when they deliver it. Later, as Lars attempts to remove the energy source from the orb, the facility experiences a power spike, and as he reaches for the orb, his arm almost freezes off. Phoebe and Podcast answer a call for the Ghostbusters and head out to investigate. When they get to the diner, they discover Melody is the ghost causing trouble for the guests. Podcast prepares to capture her, but Phoebe finds it difficult to do so. Melody was waiting for Phoebe when she gets home. After their conversation, Melody appears to be wandering the street by herself. She addresses a snarling voice of an invisible entity and inquires as to whether Phoebe is truly the target of his plan. They try at the facility to understand the orb but had no luck, so the group goes to Nadim's apartment to get more details about the orb. According to a PKE meter, Nadim possesses spiritual energy. When Lars and Lucky take Nadim to Ventman for additional investigation, it is found that Nadim possesses the capacity to control fire, which he uses to vent his resentment on Ventman. Ray goes to the New York Public Library with Phoebe and Podcast to find out more about the origins of the orb. They meet Dr. Hubert Wartsky, who gives them a historical explanation of the origin of the orb. A strong being known as Goraka was enlisted centuries ago to aid a power-hungry ruler in his conquests, but Goraka had other ideas and intended to use his powers to create a new ice age. Goraka's horns, which gave him his power, were stolen by a group of people known as the Fire Masters, Nadim's descendants, who used their abilities to imprison him inside the orb. Garaka's release would give New York the death chill, a feeling derived from their fear. At that point, they play a recording of the language heard in the beginning of the movie. A ghost that escaped with podcast breaks loose in the library and steals the recording as the group is about to leave, compelling the three to pursue it. At one point, Ray even encounters the original library ghost from the previous film, and she still terrifies him. After that, the ghost leaves the building and takes possession of the Fortitude Lion statue outside the library. Just before the police arrive, Phoebe uses her proton pack to demolish it with a torrent of fire. Peck takes this as just one more justification for taking aim at the Ghostbusters and attempting to shut them down permanently. He has repossessed the firehouse's equipment and condemned the building. When Phoebe defies Peck, she is also taken into custody, and Ray is reprimanded by Winston for putting her and Podcast in danger. The rest of the group meets Nadim and they get ready to vacate the building. Nadim is shown the rest of the fire service building in the containment chamber, then he starts practicing his fire-bending powers. Melody returns to Phoebe given that she needs some alone time. Following more conversation, Phoebe chooses to adopt a technique that allows her and Melody to exist on the same physical level. She does this by having Phoebe divide her spirit from her body for a brief 2 minutes. When the process is successful and Phoebe turns into a ghost, Melody then makes her actual intentions clear. She works for Garaka, who wanted Phoebe to open the orb on her behalf because he couldn't utilize a ghost like Melody. In return, Garaka will help Melody cross over to live with her family. When he speaks the spell while inside Phoebe's body, the demon spirit is brought back to life. When Lucky attempts to shoot Garaka with a proton blast, he freezes and breaks the stream. While the rest of the crew tries to assist Phoebe, after her spirit returns to her body, Garaka starts freezing people he thought was the Fire Lords. He then went to Nadim's apartment to get his horns back, which will make him powerful again. Everything in the city begins to freeze over, creating hundreds of lethal icicles that almost kill individuals. After getting supplies from the research facility, everyone arrives before Ventman and Nadim enter the fight. Ray makes an effort to persuade Nadim to use his Firemaster's skills in order to aid in the battle against Garaka. Through his abilities, Nadim is able to deflect the explosion out of the window while the Possessor Ghost reappears and tries to kill everyone by possessing a proton pack. The ghost then takes possession of Pizza, which Slimer quickly eats. Phoebe lines her blaster with brass since it resembles the substance of the orb that can capture Garaka after Lucky informs her that conventional proton blasts won't be sufficient to defeat Garaka. Nadim attempts to utilize his fire skills on Garaka, but because he was using it so frequently for practice, he had run out of ladder fluid. The Ghostbusters' attempts to stop the demon ghost are ineffective because he has nearly all of them frozen in ice as he makes his way to the facility. Phoebe meets Melody downstairs. Melody regrets what she did, but Phoebe assures her that Garaka never would have assisted her in crossing over, as he had said, and that she was capable of doing it all along. When Phoebe confronts Garaka directly, her brass does manage to hit him, but he still manages to overwhelm her. After that, Melody lights a match for Nadim using her flame, enabling him to use his abilities to bend fire against Garaka, and the Ghostbusters are let free. In addition to Nadim's fire bending, the Ghostbusters unleash their proton blasts, which swiftly bring down and dehorn Garaka once more as he gets stuck. After bidding Phoebe farewell, Melody eventually crosses over as the ice outside starts to melt. When the Ghostbusters return, they find Peck and a group of applauding New Yorkers. He prepares to close them down once more, but the other residents coerce him into standing with them and considering them heroes because without them, the city would be encased in 3 feet of ice. All Peck can do is adjust his tune. Slimer and the sewer dragon fly out of the facility and into the city a short while later. After Gruberson and the Spenglers get dressed, Phoebe addresses Gruberson as Dad, and they set off to bust more ghosts. The mini Stay Puft Marshmallow Men from the last film can be seen robbing an unsuspecting driver of a truck owned by the official Stay Puft firm during the credits. The end.